So 4 years ago, I set up a stall at my local farmer's market to bring an idea to the world. It was really kind of a moment of surrender, a last-ditch attempt to salvage something I'd been working on for as long as I could remember, a calling I'd been pursuing since I was 12 years old. Intentionally choosing a life of uncertainty after trying and failing for nearly a decade was one of the most terrifying and difficult decisions I've ever made. But I could have never imagined what would happen next. That thousands of people would rise up to take my idea to people and places all over the globe. That at the end of the day, intention mattered a lot more than expertise, and that my life itself would turn into a series of pinch-myself moments. My story begins with this tiny little piece of paper that I'm holding in my hand. It's an idea that I believe could change the way we eat. I called it FreshPaper. So if you just took this sheet and you dropped it into a refrigerator drawer, a fruit bowl, or any container filled with fruits and vegetables, it would keep everything in there fresh for 2 to 4 times longer. Now, if you've ever opened your fridge to find moldy strawberries or a bag of soggy spinach, you personally know how frustrating and expensive and disgusting spoilage can be. But this little piece of paper is not just designed for consumers or people like you and me. Because it's so simple and low cost, it can actually be used by large-scale growers with fields of produce beyond what the eye can see, as well as by small-scale farmers bringing their harvest to the side of the road. A few years ago, I was shocked to find out that today, despite all the technology we have, nearly half of our world's entire food supply is lost. While the world's farmers actually harvest enough food to feed the planet, over 800 million people still go hungry every single day, and over 1 billion people live without access to electricity or basic refrigeration. This small sheet of paper could significantly reduce spoilage and the massive land, water, energy, and human costs associated with it. But my story really starts here, in my grandmother's kitchen. That's a picture of me with my grandmother when I lived in India. And a few years after this picture was taken, I immigrated to the United States with my family. When I was 12, I went back to visit her, and if you've ever traveled abroad, you won't be surprised to hear that everyone warned me to be really careful about drinking the tap water. So of course, on my first day there, I was brushing my teeth and I drank some water, and I started to panic. I was convinced that I was going to get sick. But my grandmother just went in her kitchen and she came back with this like murky brown spiced tea. And she said, "Oh, just drink this and you'll be fine." I was pretty skeptical, but I didn't really have any other option. So I drank it, and I ended up not getting sick. And I still remember, for me, that was an incredible moment. It really sparked my curiosity because I couldn't believe that my grandmother, with her very limited resources, had created something that to me as a kid seems almost magical and really powerful. And so I spent some time with her learning about these spices, and when I got back home to the United States, I started a really simple experiment, which turned into my middle school science project, where really I was just adding spices to jars of dirty pond water. Very, very simple, and like many kids, I had a short attention span. I forgot about it, but a few weeks later, my mom told me to clean the garage, and I noticed that something was going on. Some of the jars where I'd added certain spices, there wasn't really anything growing in them. And so shortly after that, I was at the grocery store with my mom, and she asked me to pick out some strawberries. And I remember distinctly that almost all of the boxes seemed to have some fuzz growing at the bottom. And I had this idea. I began to wonder what would happen if I dipped strawberries in my mixture. So I ran home, and I ran into the garage, and I tried it. And a few days later, when I went back, I found the most incredible thing. It was just unbelievable. It was astonishing. I couldn't believe it. And so I ran out, and I got many different fruits and vegetables, and again, it really worked. It kept working. I just could not believe it. But to make a long story short, after spending really most of my high school years as this weird kid meticulously rotting fruits and vegetables in my garage, I created FreshPaper. And FreshPaper is infused only with edible organic spices. And because of its paper format, it can actually be used on the entire journey, from when food is first harvested until it arrives on your plate. And because it's biodegradable, compostable, and recyclable, it could make our entire food system more sustainable. So basically, I peaked in middle school. And but really, I was 17 when I found out that I was going to be granted a patent for FreshPaper. It was so... It was so unbelievable to me, and it was a pretty unlikely outcome to my story. Even at that age, I was acutely aware that my grandmother and all of the women that came before me, with all of their brilliance, they never had the opportunity to pursue their ideas. And at 17, I had a patent, and I was on my way to college to do something with mine. And I just couldn't wait to get it out into the world. I still remember, I just couldn't wait to get FreshPaper to people in the developing world, to villages in India and Africa, to people like my grandmother in areas like the village where she was from. And as soon as I got up to college, I set out to do just that. I set out to build a nonprofit. But what I actually learned over the next few years is just how hard it can be to give something away for free. It wasn't just all of the complexities involved in production and distribution. It was really when, even my closest, most trusted advisors and friends started to tell me that I really needed to think about a more realistic career, that I started to doubt if this idea would ever be useful to anyone at all. And so even though at that point I had been working on FreshPaper for really as long as I could remember, I gave up. I graduated from college without much of a plan. I really didn't know what I was going to do. I felt like I had wasted years and years pursuing this thing. And I got a part-time job doing research. One of my professors kindly offered that to me, and I just started to think about grad school. But as the years went by, I just couldn't let go of my idea. And years of being a researcher made me slowly realize that, even the best ideas left in the lab, or in my case, my kitchen, weren't really useful to anyone at all. And so that's how I found myself in the summer of 2011 at the farmer's market. Late one Friday night, my now co-founder and I, we stayed up all night and we handmade a batch of FreshPaper. And we set out to our local farmer's market in Cambridge, Massachusetts at the time. We set up a stall. This is it, actually. And we just started handing out sheets to anyone who would stop by, which was not really a lot of people, but some people took sheets home. And as the weeks went on, we kept going back, and then all of a sudden, something incredible started to happen. I started to realize that people were waiting for us at the farmer's market. I thought they had lined up for something else, but they were there for us. And then they started to call us and email us and stop us in grocery stores. They all wanted to share their stories. They wanted to tell us things like, that piece of paper you gave me, it made it possible for me to eat more fruits and vegetables this week. It made it possible for me to eat my CSA share. And best of all, they started to tell us that FreshPaper was making it possible for them to afford feeding their families fresh, healthy food on a daily basis. And that was incredibly inspiring for me, because I realized that with my small piece of paper, I was having an impact on my local food system. But even more astonishing for us was the fact that spoilage was this huge problem right in our own backyard. And so we started to think just a little bit bigger. And we didn't know it at the time, but a movement had already begun. Our earliest supporters, people from the farmers market, they were taking this idea and this mission. They believed in this idea of Fresh for All, and they were taking it to their friends and their families and even their local food banks. Because of them, within just a few months, we were taking wheelbarrows full of FreshPaper to our tiny local post office and shipping it all over the country. And then one day, we heard very unexpectedly from our first major retailer, Whole Foods. At the time, we were just on a couple of farm stands. We were going to the farmer's market, and I had always dreamt one day of working with Whole Foods, but I certainly did not feel ready. We had no idea how to even begin preparing for a meeting like that. But I'll never forget it. So it was just me and my co-founder and our intern, Kevin. And Kevin was this urban gardening college student who had just started showing up to help out every day since he met us at a farmer's market. And that was the entire company at the time. But I kind of thought that maybe if we all went, they would think we were a lot bigger. And that maybe they would just give us this chance to start in one local store. And that's what I tried to tell Kevin in the car. I said, they don't need to know everything. We'll just tell them we can do it. And Kevin, who literally from the day I met him had said, Whole Foods needs FreshPaper. He had much bigger ambitions. But I'll never forget sitting around the table, and we all kind of looked at each other because we thought we misheard them when they said, we think we'd like to launch you in the entire North Atlantic. And I remember we all kind of smiled and nodded, even though I know we were thinking the exact same thing, which is that the amount of fresh paper they needed for their first order was more than we even knew how to make. So I don't really know how we pulled it off, but with the help of a lot of our friends and our families, a lot of coffee, we actually ended up making that first delivery to Whole Foods. It was a few weeks late, but this is it. That's our distribution vehicle. So that's a borrowed Toyota Corolla and a sea of 18-wheelers at the Whole Foods Distribution Center. and really, that was how we started to scale. That was it. 48 hours later, FreshPaper was in stores across the entire North Atlantic. Within a year, we were working with some of the largest retailers in the country and shipping to farmers and families in over 35 countries. We had started with just $300 in supplies to make paper at our local farmers market. We had no budget. I had no experience. We really had no idea what we were doing. But it was this grassroots movement that took what had started in my grandma's kitchen to people and places that I could have never, ever imagined or reached on my own. And even when I look at this now, it seems crazy. And it makes me laugh because it's so unlikely for someone like me. But I show you this, and I tell you my story because it happened. It really happened to me. And it could happen to anyone, but it almost didn't happen at all. Even now, I'm still amazed that as a child, I really believed that I could take on something as complicated and as huge as global hunger, and that I actually believed that I could create something that could help millions. But as I grew older, my mind started to tell me otherwise. And like many young women, I started to mentally replay all the times that I'd been told that I needed more money, more degrees, more experience, more than I had, and more than I was. And something that has really surprised me on this journey has been how many people have approached me and shared with me their own secret inventions. And most of the time, it's women. It's women of all ages and all backgrounds who have these incredible, life-changing ideas that they're too afraid to share with anyone. And, it's made me think that a lot of the solutions to our world's greatest challenges, they're already out there. They're in a classroom in Harlem. They're in a factory in Detroit. They're in a village in India. They're in this room right now. They're in your minds today. But our fears and doubts crush so many of them. So many of them never even see the light of day. And the research on how society conditions women to doubt is sobering. Study after study has shown that as a young woman grows up, her self-esteem plummets. The confidence gap persists, and we see fewer women entrepreneurs, fewer women inventors, fewer women business leaders, fewer women leaders in any industry at all, fewer women politicians, lower pay, overall just inequality for women globally. And I think about it a lot because I think about how much doubt I struggled with for all of those years. I think about what I sometimes think of as that lost decade, where I just completely doubted my own ability to bring my own idea into the world. And it's made me realize just how fragile an idea can be. The minute we invent or create an idea, we start to walk that line between belief and doubt. And for a lot of women especially, I know because I lived this, we choose the easier path. We dismiss our ideas before we even give them the chance. And it's made me think that, perhaps it's not that we lose our creativity as we grow older. It's not something that's lost and that we have as children. I think that perhaps what happens as we grow older is we stop believing that it's possible for us to do more with our ideas, that it's possible for us to be more. And I've started to think about, what if that had happened to the single mom living on welfare who had a story that she believed the world needed to hear? What if that young girl whose doubters tried to silence her didn't have enough belief to rise above? What if that young girl in Mississippi, who could recite a poem better than anyone had ever heard before, never believed that it was possible for her to transcend her circumstances. And it's made me think a lot about how, my story is not the story of a eureka moment or serendipity. That's not why I'm here today. My story is the story of all of the people at every step who, when I almost gave in to my own fears and doubts, showed up and stepped up to show me what was possible. It's the story of people like my high school science teacher who believed that my science project could be a lot more. It's the story of those first people at the farmer's market who helped me start to overcome years and years of doubt. It's the story of people like Tony Russo, a third-generation family farm stand owner who took a leap of faith to become one of our first customers. At every step, they inspired me to just take the next step. And so, of course, I think a lot about what would have happened if I hadn't drank my grandmother's mixture. What if I had given in to my skepticism and my doubt? What if those very first people at the farmer's market hadn't stopped to listen to my crazy idea and hadn't just offered some words of encouragement? If there's just one thing I hope you'll remember from my words today, it's this: we all have the power to be that first person that believes. So the next time that you're facing doubt, the next time it starts creeping into your mind, or you're looking at a new idea or a blank page, and you start to think, who am I to attempt something so bold, so crazy, so huge? Why me? I hope you'll remember this cup of tea and think, why not? I hope you'll choose belief. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.